one of the processes that I'm engaged in here, or one of the processes that I perhaps could be engaged in to a greater extent, is a kind of metaphorical analysis. And there are standard procedures for metaphorical analysis when one is trying to identify a key metaphor or a key schema that's used as an explanatory framework for some abstract concept. And that procedure usually involves the identification of a representative corpus of work in the particular area of discourse that one's looking at. And then from that corpus of work one would seek out particular images, metaphors, schema that are used within that corpus consistently, coherently. So, for example, one of the things I did that a couple of years ago was the use of energy metaphors within the writings of Michael Chekhov. Michael Chekhov was a theatre practitioner, Russian theatre practitioner, working initially in Moscow and then in England for a while, and then towards the end of his life in Hollywood, working with actors, film actors in Hollywood. But in his writings, he wrote a series of quite influential texts on acting and directing. And what I began to do, at least, was to use his writings as a corpus, as a set of texts. And then within that set of texts, I identified a set of terms related to continue. I identified some terms within Chekhov's body of writing, the corpus of text, that were to do with energy. For example, he used the terms like will, impulse, which seems to, in quite a few of his energetics, in his writings about energy and will, impulse is one of those terms. He seems to be using them in a way which is very reminiscent of Michael's understandings of energy, the élan vital, and also very reminiscent of impetus theories of energy, which understands energy as a kind of resource, almost as a kind of special fluid or something that flows through the material of the world and animates it. And I didn't complete that particular feat. I lost interest, if I'm honest. But that's how a metaphorical analysis of a body of text, a corpus of text, would normally proceed. Through the identification of that corpus, and then the seeking out of key terms, and then a consideration of how they're used in context, and what image schema, what metaphors are powering those terms, and forming a kind of coherent conceptual structure for the ideas. That's sort of how it works. In terms of the work I'm doing now, which is working with this image schema to do with different understandings of knowledge, kind of epistemology in the flesh, if I can paraphrase Lakoff and Johnson. The corpus of work that I could, I suppose, draw on is pretty massive, and the set of terms I could draw on to try to analyse is also equally massive. Thankfully, I'm not carrying out a fully fledged metaphorical analysis. That would be well beyond the reach of this project, really, I suppose, my interest as well. So what I'm doing right now is I'm sort of cherry-picking texts, really, from a range of different sources, and from those sources, mostly philosophical writings, but also bits of writings by artists and poets, and theologians, I guess. And in my own practice, in these videos and in some artworks that I've made, what I'm trying to do is engage with and process and recirculate some of those metaphors which thread through these texts. I'm not processing the whole body of text, that would be out with the reach of my abilities probably, if I'm honest, but also my time. So I'm finding representative texts from a range of sources, including some texts of my own. I'm finding this sort of rhizomatic set of threads that run through it, which draw on the key image schema that I'm dealing with, which is this idea of knowledge as grounded within the experience of standing in a brightly lit space, engaging with the world in a variety of ways according to the sort of sensory mode that we are operating within at that moment. Perhaps inevitably, a lot of the texts that I seem to be referring to are drawn from phenomenological and existentialist writings. That's perhaps inevitable, as I say, because they are the most embodied writing, if you like. They're the parts of philosophical writings that tend to flow over the body and mould themselves in the presence of the body, if you like. And also older writings. But then again, that's perhaps inevitable. If all philosophy is footnotes to Plato, Plato did say, I think, that man is the measure of all things. So perhaps, again, perhaps that's inevitable. That if I am looking at, well, because of those works I'm looking at, that I will find confirmation for that metaphor, or that set of metaphors, or that image schema. So just to recap, whilst I'm not carrying out a fully fledged metaphorical analysis of a narrowly identified corpus of text, and with a particular image schema in mind, or with a very narrow focused image schema in mind, to excavate through those texts. Nevertheless, that's the methodology which is in the back of my mind whilst I am doing what I am doing, which is to talk about a whole load of texts and find the resonances with the image schema that I am looking at. It's a beautiful day now. It's pouring down everywhere, and now the sun's out. It's great.